Hello. You ever wake up one day and realize your entire life is one big cosmic joke? Yeah, that was me. One minute, I was a happily married man. The next, I was watching my wife fake moan into a phone, thinking she was alone. Life sure has a way of handing you a brick when you're expecting a bouquet. But hey, why cry about it when you can turn the whole damn thing into a spectacle? So let me tell you how I made sure my cheating wife and her affair partner got exactly what they deserved. And trust me, it's better than any revenge flick you've ever seen. My name's Ethan. I'm 34, live in Austin, Texas, and until recently, I thought I was living the dream. A well-paying job in tech, a house in a quiet neighborhood, and a marriage to a woman I genuinely adored, Rachel. She was the kind of person who made strangers feel welcome in an instant, always the life of the party, always laughing a little too loudly. Maybe I should have noticed the cracks earlier, but I was too busy being the doting husband to realize I was playing the role of a fool. It all started with small things. Rachel got a little too interested in her phone, like it held the secrets of the universe. She started working late more often, though she never seemed stressed about deadlines. Then came the sudden interest in her appearance, new lingerie, extra gym sessions, fresh highlights in her hair. Now, before you call me paranoid, let's just say I'm a firm believer in trusting your gut. And mine? It was screaming. But the moment of truth came on an idle Tuesday evening. I had just walked in from work, exhausted and craving leftover pizza, when I heard her voice from the hallway. "I miss you already," she giggled into the phone. "I can't wait to see you again." I froze. Now, let me tell you something. I'm not the jealous type. But there's something about hearing your wife flirt like a love-struck teenager with someone who isn't you that really kicks you in the soul. I stood there for a moment, just listening, feeling my brain short-circuit. Then it hit me. Why get mad when you can get even? You ever get the feeling that karma takes too damn long? Like, sure, they say what goes around comes around, but sometimes you gotta give it a little push. Well, I was about to shove karma off a cliff. Now, I could have done what every betrayed husband does, rage, scream, maybe even cry into a whiskey glass while listening to old country songs. But that's not my style. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table, cracked open a beer, and started planning. After hearing Rachel whisper her sweet nothings into the phone, I knew I had two options: confront her like an idiot or sit back and really enjoy the show. I went with the latter. No accusations, no arguments, just cold, calculated patience. The first step? Figuring out who the lucky bastard was. Now, I had my suspicions. She worked at an upscale real estate agency, the kind that made people dress in designer suits just to sell houses that smelled like fresh cookies. A few months ago, she started mentioning a guy from work named Derek. She always spoke about him in that casual but not casual way women do when they're trying too hard to sound uninterested. "Oh, Derek's hilarious. He said the funniest thing today. Derek's so good with clients, he just gets people, you know?" "Yeah, Rachel, I bet he does." So, I did what any sane, emotionally stable man would do. I snooped. Nothing too invasive at first. Just some light social media stalking. His Instagram? Full of gym selfies and captions like "grind now, shine later." His Facebook? A sea of cringy motivational quotes. But the most interesting part? His relationship status, in a relationship with Melissa Carter. Well, I was dealing with a classic case of a cheater cheating on his girlfriend with my wife. This was perfect. I could have exposed them right then and there. Sent a screenshot to Melissa, forwarded it to Rachel's boss, hell, even posted it on Facebook for the drama. But I wanted something better. Something that would leave a mark. I had just found the perfect way to make them both suffer. All I had to do now is wait. Patience is a virtue, they say. But let's be real, sometimes patience is just the slow burn before the explosion. And oh, I was about to enjoy the fireworks. By now, I had everything I needed. Rachel was cheating with Derek, a gym bro wannabe motivational speaker, and he had a girlfriend named Melissa who had no idea what was happening behind her back. But instead of charging in like a lunatic with screenshots and accusations, I decided to get creative. Why expose them right away when I could let their world unravel on its own? So, I started playing dumb. I acted like the same loving husband I had always been. Kissed Rachel on the forehead before work. Asked about her day. Cooked dinner. Meanwhile, I was gathering intel like a private investigator. See, when someone thinks they're getting away with something, they get comfortable. And comfortable people? They get sloppy. Rachel wasn't just seeing Derek during office hours. No, she was meeting him at a hotel downtown, the kind that prides itself on discretion and luxury. I know this because she left a very detailed receipt in her car, tucked under an old coffee cup, as if an $89.99 charge to the Madison Hotel wouldn't raise eyebrows. Amateur mistake. Derek, on the other hand, was a bit smarter, or at least he thought he was. He didn't leave receipts or texts lying around, but he was stupid in a different way. He still had an active social media presence. I spent the next few days studying his Instagram stories like I was cramming for an exam. It was mostly predictable: gym check-ins, motivational speeches about grinding for success, the occasional steak dinner selfie. But every now and then, there'd be a glitch. One night, he posted a boomerang of himself clinking wine glasses at a dimly lit restaurant. The caption? Celebrating big wins wine glass. Cute. Except Rachel had come home late that night, claiming she had a work event. I cross-checked the timestamps. Her event and his celebration matched perfectly. Then came the real jackpot. A gym mirror selfie with the classic caption, "Rise and grind." No excuses. Except if you zoomed in. Oh, and believe me, I zoomed in. You could see Rachel's purse sitting on the bench behind him. The same purse I had bought her for our anniversary last year. These two idiots were practically serving me the evidence on a silver platter. But I wasn't just collecting proof. I was building a narrative. The goal wasn't just to catch them. It was to turn them against each other. So, I reached out to Melissa. Not directly, of course. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I set up a fake Instagram account. No profile picture, no posts, just a burner account with a name generic enough to be ignored, but intriguing enough to be noticed. Truth Hurts 22. And then, I started slow. A simple DM. "Hey Melissa, I'm not sure if this is important, but I think you should check out Derek's latest post. Look closely in the mirror." I didn't say who I was. Didn't say why I cared. Just left a little breadcrumb for her to follow. And she did. Because when doubt creeps in, it spreads like wildfire. Melissa didn't respond right away, but I knew I had planted the seed. The next day, Derek's Instagram went suspiciously quiet. No gym selfies, no meal prep pictures, not even a half-assed Monday motivation post. Which meant one thing: he was busy putting out a fire. But here's where it gets even better. Rachel came home that night, looking off. Not guilty, not scared, annoyed. Like someone had just thrown a wrench into her perfect little secret. She barely spoke to me, didn't even pretend to be interested in whatever TV show I put on. That's when I knew. Melissa had confronted Derek. And the best part? I wasn't even close to being done. I had so much more planned. Some people think revenge is about rage, about screaming accusations and throwing plates across the room. But real revenge? It's quiet. It's patient. It's watching someone dig their own grave, then handing them a shovel when they realize they're too deep to climb out. By the time I had finished planting the seeds of doubt in Melissa's mind, I already knew how this was going to play out. Derek and Rachel thought they were untouchable. They were so wrapped up in their little fantasy that they never considered the possibility that someone else was playing the game. Someone better. The morning after my little Instagram message to Melissa, the air in my house had shifted. Rachel was restless, pacing around the kitchen like a woman waiting for a bomb to go off. She wasn't eating. She wasn't scrolling on her phone like she usually did over breakfast. She wasn't even talking to me, which was a first. That meant Melissa had done her part. I kept my routine the same. Kissed Rachel on the cheek, told her to have a good day, and walked out the door as if I wasn't orchestrating the collapse of her secret life. What she didn't know was that I had parked my car down the street and waited. 15 minutes later, she left for work, but not in the direction of her office. No, she was heading downtown. To him. I followed at a distance, blending into traffic, taking my time. No rush. When you know the ending of a story, you can sit back and enjoy the slow unraveling. Rachel pulled up to a cafe, the kind with overpriced espresso and minimalist furniture that made people feel sophisticated. And there he was, Derek, already seated at a table outside, looking like a guy who had just barely survived a house fire. His hair was a mess. His usual smug, gym bro confidence? Gone. He was hunched over his coffee like it held the meaning of life. Rachel stormed up to him, and I could already tell this wasn't a casual conversation. She was pissed. Derek was defensive. Even without hearing their words, I knew what was happening. She was demanding answers. He was fumbling for excuses. See, the beauty of my plan wasn't just exposing them. It was turning them against each other. Cheaters don't trust easily because they know what betrayal looks like. And once you plant the idea that they've been played, they self-destruct. I watched as Rachel waved her arms, frustrated, her voice rising just enough for heads to turn. Derek was shaking his head, his hands gripping the table like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. He tried reaching for her hand, but she yanked it back. Oh, this was getting good. Then, like clockwork, Melissa arrived. I had timed this perfectly. She stepped out of her car, sunglasses on, moving with that quiet, deadly kind of energy that only comes from a woman who just discovered she's been made a fool of. She didn't rush, didn't yell, just walked right up to the table and sat down next to Derek. Rachel froze. Derek's face drained of color. And I sat back in my car and watched the scene unfold, the best live entertainment I'd ever had. Melissa pulled out her phone, tapped the screen a few times, and slid it across the table. Receipts, screenshots, proof. The kind of irrefutable evidence that makes people's stomachs drop. Rachel leaned forward, her expression shifting from rage to pure panic. Melissa didn't need to say much. She just pointed at Derek, then at Rachel. Then she stood up, calmly dumped her untouched iced coffee into Derek's lap, and walked away. I had just killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Rachel now had no idea whether Derek had played her or if Melissa had just blindsided them both. And Derek? He was officially a man without options. But here's the thing about people like Rachel and Derek. They don't learn. They panic. They scramble. And that's when they make their worst mistakes. I had them exactly where I wanted them. And I wasn't even finished yet. There's something beautiful about watching a liar run out of lies. The moment their back hits the wall, and they realize there's no more room to escape, it's like seeing a magician fumble a trick in front of a sold-out crowd. Rachel was unraveling. After the disaster at the cafe, she came home looking like she had been through a tornado. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and her usual confident energy? Gone. She barely glanced at me as she walked in, dropped her bag by the door, and let out the deepest sigh I had ever heard. I could feel the storm coming. She poured herself a glass of wine, a big one, and sat at the kitchen counter, staring at nothing. I let the silence stretch between us, enjoying the way the weight of the truth pressed down on her. I wanted to see if she'd say something. Anything. An apology. A lie. Some excuse about work stress or a misunderstanding. But no. She just sat there, swirling her wine, trying to piece together a way out of the mess she had created. I decided to help her out. So, I said, keeping my tone light, casual, like we were discussing weekend plans. How's Derek? Her hand froze around the glass. And just like that, it was over. She turned to me, eyes wide, her whole body tensing like she had been hit with a bucket of ice water. What? She croaked. I shrugged, walking over to the fridge like this was any other night. Derek, you know, your hilarious coworker? The one you've been sneaking off to hotels with? I grabbed a bottle of water, twisted off the cap, and took a slow sip. Yeah, him. Rachel dropped the wine glass. It shattered on the counter, red liquid spilling everywhere. She barely even noticed. Her breathing turned sharp, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. I don't. No, take your time, I said, waving my hand. I'd love to hear whatever excuse you've been rehearsing. Or, I pulled out my phone, tapped the screen a few times, and turned it toward her. Would you rather I read Derek's Instagram captions back to you? Her face drained of color. I could see the wheels in her head spinning, calculating, trying to figure out what I knew, how much evidence I had, if there was still a way out of this. There wasn't. And that's when it happened. She snapped. Rachel went from silent and panicked to furious in seconds. She slammed her hand on the counter, eyes blazing. Were you spying on me? She shrieked. I laughed, because that was the moment I knew I had one. Oh, you don't get to play the victim here, I said, setting my phone down. You don't get to cry about privacy when you've been sneaking around behind my back. You don't get to act offended when you're the one lying to my face every single day. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She wanted to argue, wanted to flip this on me. But there was nothing she could say that would make her look like anything other than exactly what she was, a cheater. Then came the classic defense mechanism. Rachel turned it on me. If you had been paying attention, if you actually cared, maybe I wouldn't have had to. I cut her off before she could even finish. Nope, not doing that. You don't get to rewrite history and act like this is my fault. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to something cold and final. You cheated. You lied. You threw away everything we had because you wanted some excitement. And now? You're upset that you got caught. She looked like she wanted to throw something. Good. I let the silence hang heavy in the air before delivering the final blow. Oh, and just so you know, I said, picking up my phone again. Melissa knows. And judging by the fact that Derek hasn't posted a gym selfie in 24 hours, I'm guessing he's having just as much fun as you right now. Rachel paled. Her whole body sagged, like she had just realized that her little fantasy had completely collapsed. She tried one last time, her voice weak, desperate. Ethan, we can fix this. I smiled, and shook my head. No, Rachel, we can't. And with that, I walked away, leaving her to sit in the ruins of everything she had destroyed. Some people think the worst part of betrayal is the moment you discover it. The punch to the gut, the world-shattering realization that someone you trusted completely has been sneaking around behind your back. But that's not true. The worst part? It's watching them try to escape the consequences. Rachel wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't even trying to explain anymore. No, she was doing what all cheaters do when the house of lies collapses around them. She was scrambling for control. Her voice had shifted from desperate to calculated. Listen, she started, smoothing her hands over the counter, like that would somehow fix the shattered glass and the mess she had made of our marriage. Let's just take a step back. A step back? Oh, that was rich. You don't just step back from this, Rachel. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her squirm. You don't get to cheat, lie, gaslight, and then hit the reset button like this is some glitch in the system. She sucked in a breath, blinking rapidly, like she was trying to summon tears that just wouldn't come. The act was pathetic. This wasn't regret. It was damage control. You don't understand, she pressed, her voice slipping into that wounded tone that had probably worked 100 times before. I never meant to hurt you. And there it was. The cheater's anthem. I tilted my head. You didn't mean to hurt me? I repeated. Slow, deliberate. You snuck around for months. You lied to my face every single day. You let me plan a future while you were, what? Living in a fantasy world? I shook my head. No, Rachel. You meant to hurt me. You just didn't expect to get caught. She flinched like I had physically slapped her. Good. But still, she kept trying. Ethan, I was confused, she whispered, her fingers tightening on the edge of the counter like she was holding on for dear life. I got caught up in something I didn't know how to stop. But I love you. I laughed. Actually laughed. The sound must have rattled her because she snapped her mouth shut, eyes widening slightly. Love me? I scoffed, pushing off the wall. You don't love me, Rachel. You love what I give you. Stability. Comfort. A safety net for when your reckless decisions come back to bite you. I walked closer, lowering my voice. And now? You're scared. Not because you hurt me. Not because you regret what you did. But because you finally have to live with the mess you made. She opened her mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to deny, but I didn't care. I wasn't interested in anything she had to say. I pulled my phone from my pocket, scrolled for a second, and then turned the screen toward her. Rachel stared at it, blinking, confusion settling in. What is this? She asked. I smirked. Your future. She looked again. The confusion didn't last long. See, while Rachel had been busy sneaking around, I had been busy protecting myself. I had every single piece of evidence I needed. Screenshots, call logs, location tracking data that showed her patterns over the last few months. But the real kicker? The cherry on top? Bank statements. Turns out, hotels and fancy dinners leave a paper trail. And when you're dumb enough to use joint accounts for your secret rendezvous, well, that makes things so much easier. Her face drained of color. You wouldn't, she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh, I would, I said, my smirk widening. And I already did. I stepped back, enjoying the sheer panic settling into her features. The divorce papers are ready. My lawyer is handling everything. I sighed dramatically. And because Texas has some very interesting divorce laws when it comes to infidelity, guess what? I smiled. You get nothing. Rachel gasped. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. You can't just. I can, Rachel, I interrupted, my voice colder than it had ever been. And I did. She was shaking now. But the best part? I wasn't done. No, I had one last move left to make. One that was going to ruin her little fantasy world forever. And I was going to enjoy every second of it. Rachel sat there, frozen. Her hands clenched into fists on the counter, her shoulders tight, her mind working overtime to find some way out. She thought she was playing chess. She thought she was clever. But see, I wasn't playing chess. I was playing demolition derby. And I had just rammed her straight into the wreckage she created. She swallowed hard. Ethan, please, don't do this. Her voice was softer now, almost pitiful. Almost. But I knew better. I knew what was behind those wide, desperate eyes. Fear. Not guilt. Not remorse. Fear. Not fear of losing me. No, fear of losing everything else. The lifestyle. The house. The security. The comfortable little life she thought she could trash and still come home to like nothing happened. I let the silence stretch. Let her squirm. Let her sit in the tension she had built brick by brick, lie by lie. Then I went for the final move. You know, I've been busy today. I pulled out my phone and scrolled, slowly, deliberately. While you were out having your little meltdown with Derek, I was making calls. I glanced up just in time to see her flinch. And you'll never guess who I spoke to. Her breath hitched. Oh, wait. I think you will guess. I turned my phone toward her, pressing play on a voicemail. Hi, Ethan. This is Greg from Rachel's office. Listen, I wanted to thank you for reaching out. I had no idea she was involved in this kind of behavior, and frankly, it's unacceptable. We take professionalism seriously here, and given the nature of these allegations and the proof you provided, well, let's just say she won't have to worry about clocking in on Monday. I'll be in touch soon. The voicemail ended. I locked eyes with her. The color drained from her face. You called my boss? Her voice was barely a whisper, but the rage in it was unmistakable. I smiled. No, I emailed him. With details. Receipts. Screenshots of your very professional conversations with Derek. Oh, and those lovely credit card statements where you charged company dinners for personal affairs. You know, fraud. I gave a mock frown. Turns out, your firm doesn't really like that. Rachel shot up from her chair. You ruined my career. No, Rachel. My voice stayed calm, level. You ruined your career the moment you decided to play office romance instead of doing your job. I leaned forward. I just made sure you got the credit you deserved. Her chest rose and fell in uneven breaths. Her hands trembled as she braced herself against the counter. And for the first time, I saw it. Not anger. Not defiance. Defeat. But I wasn't done yet. Oh, and speaking of Derek, I grabbed my drink and took a slow sip. You'll love this next part. Her lips pressed together, bracing herself. I continued, enjoying every second. Melissa threw him out. Completely. Kicked him off their lease, blocked his number, even put up a nice little social media post warning every woman in the city about him. And from what I hear, I smirked. She may have sent his boss a similar email to the one I sent yours. Apparently, corporate doesn't like paying salaries to guys who do their best work in hotel rooms. Rachel let out a shaky breath, her entire world crumbling around her. I waited for the inevitable. The moment where the shock turned into rage. The moment where she realized this was real, and there was no way out. And then, there it was. Her fist slammed against the counter. You manipulative. I raised a hand. No need for insults, Rachel. This is just cause and effect. I gestured toward the door. Actions? Consequences. You played stupid games. Now you win nothing. Her breathing was uneven. She looked at me like she wanted to throw something, scream, beg, anything. But there was nothing left for her to hold on to. I let out a small sigh, shaking my head. And to think, you really thought you could get away with it. Then I pulled the final nail for her coffin. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a neatly folded envelope, and slid it across the counter. Divorce papers. She just stared at them. This is how it ends, I said simply. You sign those, pack your stuff, and get out. I tilted my head. Or, you can refuse. But fair warning. Every single person you know already knows who you are now. Her hands trembled as she reached for the envelope. I could see it, the fight draining out of her. Rachel had spent months lying, deceiving, thinking she was in control. And now? She was nothing but a walking consequence. I stepped back, watching as she finally accepted her fate. I hope Derek was worth it, I murmured. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. Because we both knew the answer. 6 months later, Rachel signed the papers. She moved out 2 weeks later. Last I heard, she was staying in some overpriced rental, job hopping, trying to reinvent herself. Derek? Well, let's just say unemployment isn't a great look on a guy who used to post motivational gym quotes. Melissa, on the other hand, is thriving. She reached out after everything, just to say thanks. Apparently, she had a long list of women who had been waiting for Derek's downfall and took great pleasure in helping it along. As for me, I got my house back, my peace, and the satisfaction of knowing I didn't just end a bad marriage, I obliterated it. Some people say revenge isn't worth it, that it's better to just walk away. I disagree. Because watching two cheaters destroy each other, that's a masterpiece. And I don't regret a single second of it. Bye-bye.